Well, welcome. Welcome to our shining star. And I want to thank all of you for joining us as we welcome our latest slate of our RNC Rising Stars. We launched the Rising Stars program in 2013 to spotlight the great talent that we have in our party and to introduce individuals that we know that are making out their names for themselves and that are advancing our great Republican cause on the local level, the state level, and the national level. So it is my honor today to introduce to you these great four rising stars. Anitere Flores, who is from my home state of Florida. Conrad James, thank you. Conrad James, Hadley Heath Manning, and Sharon Reyes. Now I want to share just a little bit of information about each of them. Anitere Flores is a state senator in my home state of Florida, and she previously served the State House of Representatives, where she was Deputy Majority Leader. A lifelong Floridian, she earned her JD from the University of Florida and was hired by Governor Jeb Bush to serve as his education policy chief after serving on the House Education Council. A wife, a mother, she's deeply involved in her community and serves on the boards of organizations focused on drug and mental health services, disabled children, and at-risk students. Please join me in welcoming Anitere Flores. Conrad James joins us from the land of enchantment, New Mexico, where he serves as a member of the State House of Representatives, and I will stop a moment for Rosie Tripp. His path to politics was far from typical. After studying electrical engineering and graduating summa cum laude from Notre Dame, he earned his master's and doctorate from Cornell in applied and engineering physics. Since 2002, he's worked as a research engineer developing biosensors. He has also served on the University of New Mexico Board of Regents. He and his wife, Natasha, have 3 children. And please join me in a huge welcome to New Mexico's Conrad James. Hadley Heath Manning is a director of health policy at the Independent Women's Forum, where she has worked since 2010. There's a good chance that if you have watched TV at any time, you've seen her on Cavuto, Stossel, Hannity, PBS's To the Contrary. She's been published in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Political, National Review, and that's just a few of the places where you've been able to read some of her op-eds and her information. A former National Review Institute Washington Fellow, she was named to Red Alert Politics 30 Under 30, a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill. She now lives in Denver with her husband. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a huge welcome for Hadley Heath Manning. He's getting everybody ready. Sharon Reyes, finally today, we welcome Sharon Reyes, the 21st Attorney General for Utah and the first ethnic minority elected to statewide office. Appointed in 2013 and re-elected this year, he has been lauded by legislators from both sides of the aisle for his work, ethic, and legal acumen. And he's won praise from Utah Governor Gary Hubert for increased excellence and transparency in the Attorney General's office. He's led litigation on key national issues, including lawsuits challenging federal overreach. Most recently, Sean has helped organize 23 states in challenging the constitutionality of President Obama's executive action on immigration. As a partner at Utah's largest firm at the time, he was named the first ever National Outstanding Young Lawyer by the American Bar Association. A graduate of Berkeley Law, he's a former college athlete and mixed martial arts fighter. Sean and his wife are the proud parents of 6 great Republican, little future Republicans. So let's hear it for Sharon Reyes. Thank you. Now, before I open up things for the questions to to you guys in the audience. I just have a few questions of my own that I wanted to see if we could get your input and your thoughts on. First, we're going to go to Conrad. You have a PhD in physics from Cornell. What was your path from physics and engineering to the state legislature? Has your training affected your lawmaking, and has it allowed you to offer a unique perspective?
So there are a couple of answers to that question. The first of which is I think that I got a little bit tired of just sitting around and watching the TV and yelling at the TV, and wanted to get more involved in trying to help my community and help my state. The second answer is, as a person who's trained in the sciences and engineering, I don't see enough people with my background involved in politics. And we typically have a very different way of approaching problem solving than, say, other fields. So for an engineer and a scientist, it's not just about getting to the right answer, but actually having the most efficient way of getting to that right answer. So I think a lot of times we see in the state and at the federal level good legislation that has good intentions, but it falls down in the implementation. Talk about the Affordable Care Act. You have a certain intention, but the implementation has been an absolute disaster. So when I talk about legislation, it's not just about what the intention is, it's about how to actually implement that and get it into law and actually start helping people. So I think that with my background in science and engineering, a little bit more analytical, looking at the data, not just anecdotes, not just stories of problems that need to be solved, I think that really gets us to the point where we can talk about comprehensive solutions. So that's probably why I decided to run.
Thank you, Conrad. Now, Hadley, for the American people, Obamacare has been full of surprises, and none of them good ones. Lost doctors, lost plans, higher premium, broken websites. You spend your days studying Obamacare's effects. What's our next Obamacare surprise?
Oh, well, first of all, let me say, and I think I speak on behalf of all the Rising Stars, we're so honored to be here and honored to have this opportunity to speak before you guys about these very important issues. The Independent Women's Forum, whom I work for, is on a mission to increase the number of women who value free markets and personal liberty. And so as Director of Health Policy there, I'm about trying to raise awareness and appreciation for free markets even in our healthcare sector where they're so important and so important to women. So what's our next Obamacare surprise? You know, the things you listed, for people who have really followed this issue, even they were not surprises. It wasn't a surprise that premiums went up. It wasn't a surprise that insurers responded with narrower doctor networks. It wasn't a surprise that people had difficulty working through a government bureaucracy via a website or a hotline or what have you. And I don't think what's going to happen next in Obamacare will necessarily be a surprise to those of us in this room either. But you know, as I've said many times, the health reform law or Obamacare or the ACA or whatever you want to call it was really more about health insurance than it was about health care. And while those two systems are very tied in the United States, we cannot get caught in the trap of discussing the success or failure of this law in terms of participation rates. Because participating in the exchanges or Medicaid, that doesn't mean that people have real access to the healthcare services that they need. And so my fear is that if the law continues on its current implementation path, and that means if the law is not affected by major judicial changes or legislative changes, which could be on the horizon, then we may very well see impacts in the health care sector, meaning people may have to wait longer to see a doctor. People may be calling doctors' offices unable to get an appointment with a new physician. And these are very real impacts that don't just affect our pocketbooks, but they can affect our quality of life. And finally, I'll say it's very difficult to miss the innovation that never happens, and it's very difficult to miss the cure that came 10 years too late. But that's also something that this health reform law could impact, because the way we allocate resources in any sector affects the way that we move to the next innovation, the next technology, the next drug, the next cure. And that's important, I think, very much so for our generation and for future generations. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Hadley. Now, Anitere, you've had a perspective on state government and budgets from both the executive and legislative branches. When it comes to budgetary matters, Why do you think it's so hard for Democrats to understand the importance of a balanced budget amendment?
Right. Well, I guess the short answer is that when it's not your money, it's a lot easier to just not care. You know, wouldn't we all want to be in a situation where someone just gave us a pocketbook and said, here, just kind of keep spending. Don't worry about who's going to pay the bills. It'll be someone that comes after you. I mean, I'd love to do that in my own home, but we know that we can't do that. But really, when we think about it, this isn't a problem that is limited just to Democrats. When you think about it, I mean, certainly we have our fair share of Republicans in Congress that sometimes have a tough time with dealing with that as well. And so it's important for us to recognize that across the board, there's sometimes an issue with elected officials spending money that's not theirs, spending money in a way that's not responsible because it's not their money. Now, in the state of Florida, we have a balanced budget amendment. We have to. And I think when you explain that to people, people find that so refreshing. You say the way that we budget in the state of Florida is no different than the way that you budget in your home, no different than the way that you budget in your business. We budget a certain amount. When that money runs out, then we can't keep spending any more money. And sometimes people ask me about the debt. Well, you know, of course, in the state of Florida, we have debt much like in any other state. We have future obligations, be it to retirees or other issues. We just simply manage it. We simply budget for it. And we have a constitutional requirement that our debt cannot exceed a certain amount. We also have in the state of Florida, we're blessed to have a wonderful Republican governor, Rick Scott, who was just recently reelected. And Governor Scott makes it his sole objective to ensure that we in the state of Florida are living within our means. We're blessed to have some more money this year in the budget. The economy is doing well, as it is hopefully in your home state as well. But even with those surpluses, the governor has asked us as the legislature to put some money away, for a rainy day. And that's what we're able to do in the state. We're able to do it in a responsible way. Like I said, at the end of the day, that's what each of us does in our home, in our businesses. I'm hopeful that it's something that Congress and the folks in Washington will get to wake up to as well. But increasingly, I feel that until we have really a formalized balanced budget amendment, that might be something that doesn't happen. So it's really incumbent upon us to continue to reach out to our federal congressmen and congresswomen and explain to them that they have to live the same way that we have to live. When there's no money left in the checkbook, there's no money left to spend.
Thank you. Thank you. Sean, you helped support an undercover operation as one of the lead negotiators in South America to combat child sexual trafficking. Tell us about that mission, why you were there, and what you've done in Utah to address this international horrible epidemic.
Thank you. And before I do, again, let me join Hadley and my colleagues in thanking all of you for letting us be here with as many talented and accomplished individuals and leaders like you all in the party. It is such an honor to be recognized in this way. With regard to human trafficking, you know, I knew intellectually, I'd heard the statistics, 20 million modern slaves in the world today, people held against their will, 2 million of which are children. And I'd been to panels and listened to it, and I understood that. I've only been in office for a little over a year, appointed first and then just recently elected. But it came really close to home this last year when my office was prosecuting a case in Utah against an international cartel leader. He was a narco trafficker and a human trafficker, and he'd abducted children from Central and South America, brought them into our community, and then abducted and abused sexually children from Utah and used them to mule his drugs. And when we prosecuted that case, I started to understand the depths of the depravity that was going on, not just in far-flung places around the world, but in our state. We also shut down a number of businesses that were fronting for legitimate businesses like massage parlors, where women have been abducted and drugged and abused and done horrible things to. An organization called Operation Underground Railroad, which I've helped to build up, an NGO nonprofit with former Navy SEALs and federal law enforcement officers, had a mission down to Colombia that they had targeted. We had worked with the Colombian government before, in Cartagena particularly, on some successful operations. We had trained their law enforcement with technology and tools, investigatively and prosecutorially, to take down cartels. And they gave us a tip that in these remote islands, children were being trafficked. So we went down on a weekend, liberated 127 young girls, Thank you. Thank you. Some of whom were as young as 10 years old, and I have a 12-year-old daughter, one of my 6 kids, and to be able to not only strike a blow against this particular trafficking enterprise, but to be able to tell these girls that they were going to be able to go home to families that have been praying for years for their safe return was a remarkable thing. Again, my hope in doing that as the Attorney General of Utah was to try to stamp out in those countries by equipping permanently our law enforcement partners to address those things before they came back, like this case that I had talked about earlier that we prosecuted. We have done a number of things in our state proactively educate people and promote. And my ask to you today is to look up on the website Operation Underground Railroad. See and be aware of what's going on in your communities, because it's happening, although we don't want to acknowledge it much of the time, in the midst of some of our very small communities, and we can make a difference, all of you, and I know the Republican Party can lead out on this issue, so thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for all your help and support in that. Conrad, what reforms, especially economic reforms, have Republicans pursued in New Mexico that you think are good examples for other states to follow? What are your priorities personally for broad-based economic reforms to help our working middle-class families?
Well, one of the things that I think a lot of people appreciate about the state of New Mexico is how beautiful it is, and a lot of the resources that we have at our disposal in our state. Unfortunately, it has led to our state being heavily dependent on certain sectors of our economy, for instance, oil and gas. And so while the drop in the price at the pump has been great for consumers, it has hurt our state in terms of our state budget. We get approximately 30 to 40% of all of our state revenue from oil and gas in one form or another, so it's been very difficult for us to try to really focus on diversifying our economy, and that's been number one for our state. And we have a wonderful governor, Susana Martinez, who, since she first came into office in 2011, has talked about this issue, diversifying our economy, growing certain sectors, making sure that we have a business climate that's hospitable for businesses to operate and to grow and to flourish. And so one of the things that we've really been focusing on for the last couple of years or so is the manufacturing sector. Now, as a state in New Mexico where we have about 2 million in population, we have roughly around 900,000 jobs. Most states have approximately 9% of their workforce that's in manufacturing. Our state is down at about 4%. In this sector, these are typically higher paying jobs. They're much more robust. They're more stable because there's a lot of infrastructure that's required. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we expand our manufacturing sector? These are good jobs. You know, the United States still leads the world in terms of manufacturing. So we've been looking at things such as passing a single sales factor law a couple of years ago to allow for companies to simply be taxed on their sales and not on other components of their business activities. And then also looking at things such as making sure that we have opportunities for other types of businesses to grow, and to make sure that we have a reformed tax code. That's another big thing that we've been talking about in our state, is making sure that the tax code is transparent, making sure that everyone can understand how it works, and make sure that businesses and individuals know how to file their taxes and pay their taxes. It's really important for me, and this is one of the things that I've really focused on in this most recent campaign, is in making sure that, again, we have a business climate that's conducive for entrepreneurship. You know, it really is the engine of the country's economy. Those folks who are out there every day coming up with these great ideas, maxing out their credit cards, taking all of the hits and the financial burdens that they face trying to start up a business, something that they're passionate about. And so I've really been focusing on trying to come up with ideas to help make sure that folks like that, who are really again, sacrificing a lot to try to better themselves and to better their community, have a good opportunity in our state. And so lots of tax issues, manufacturing, job sector, those are really what we've been focused on.
Thank you, Conrad. Anitere, as a female politician, what do you say to other women who want to run for office, and what do you tell right-of-center women, not just to get them to vote Republican, but to get out there and volunteer for Republicans?
So this is one of my favorite topics. My short answer is to just do it. Don't overanalyze. Don't think about it too much. I know that there are surely pundits and consultants that are in this room or watching us that say that that is bad advice. I will tell you that is that's the right advice. As women, sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing something. If I had planned my whole life on saying, well, what I'm going to do is this and then run for office, I don't know if I ever would have. I think that God blessed me that that when it came time for me to run, it was just being at the right place at the right time. I made a pro and con list, lots of pros, and my only con was that maybe I could lose. So I said, well, that's not awful. So I guess I'll just go for it. And then, surprise to a whole bunch of people, including myself, I won. And so really, the answer is just do it. I mean, we bring a unique perspective. We know that. But think about all that women do at home and at work. We are oftentimes the heads of households. We are the ones who manage finances. We manage schedules. We are we resolve conflicts at home, at work. We mediate. Like I said, we manage schedules. Ask me, who's picking up my 2 boys from school today, who's taking one home, who's taking the other one to karate, and who's picking them up. And we're able to do that somehow, from across the country. We do those things and we bring those perspectives in our homes, in our work. Why not bring that to elected office as well? I encourage everyone that's here. We all know someone who might be thinking of running for office. Go home and encourage that person, because sometimes women need a little bit more encouragement, but please just do it. And when it comes to the issue of why be a Republican and why be involved in the Republican Party, of course we know the short answer is, well, the Republican Party shares our values as women. Well, what exactly does that mean? As women, what we want to know is there going to be a good job for myself, for my husband, for my family, for my children in this economy today and 10 years from now? Are my kids going to be able to go to the school that we choose, not be forced to go to the school that the government chooses? Are we going to be able in our jobs, in our small businesses, are we going to be able to thrive and do well on our own without having to worry about government involvement and government bureaucracy? Those are the issues and those are the values that are important to women. And it is clearly the Republican Party that is aligned with and shares those same values. At the end of the day, when we're in charge, where we're able to do things, we just get things done. And so that's kind of what I share as we go around and talk to other folks. And I hope that you all, as you go home and spend, the next couple of months before the next quarterly, maybe recruit a candidate, have someone come, have them see that it's not as hard or as bad as sometimes people think. You actually get to have a lot of fun, and every now and then you actually do get to make a real difference in people's lives, and that's absolutely the most rewarding thing.
Thank you, Anitere. Hadley, Democrats have spent a lot of time saying Obamacare has helped women, but your work shows that there are many more negative effects that are being overlooked by Democrats and the media. Can you tell us about that? And do you think people are becoming more aware of these problems it's brought to our families?
I definitely agree with the last part of your question. Are people becoming more aware? There was just a segment on 60 Seconds recently about some of the harms of Obamacare. But to get back to the part of the question about women, our motto at the Independent Women's Forum is all issues are women's issues. We don't like women's issues being put in a box in the corner as if reproductive health or abortion are the only issues that women care about. Certainly those are important, but we care very much about the future of our healthcare system. We also do a lot of work on issues like the wage gap, the disparity between men and women's wages, and paid sick leave mandates, and other issues that are becoming more and more in the center as we move forward. But, when it comes to any government-centric solution where the left says, here's a group of people that this solution will primarily help, often those people are the ones primarily hurt. And that is the case with women and Obamacare. Just Friday, January 9th, the Department of Health and Human Services released a report, an update, about women advancing the health of women and children under the Affordable Care Act. And they constantly lean back on a few talking points. One of those talking points we know very well about no copay preventative care services that are now available to millions of women. They also highlight that the number of women without insurance has decreased. And then finally, they point out that the majority of people who have signed up for an exchange plan are women, about 56%. But this is no surprise to people who follow the healthcare issue as a public policy matter. The majority, a strong majority of people in the Medicaid program are female, even a majority of Medicare enrollees. And there are many reasons why. We could talk about that. That's a very interesting and another discussion. But you know, the story that they're telling is that if 56% of people on exchange plans are women, those women are being helped. There's another side to that story, which is all of those women who are enrolled in some of these programs are on the front lines of the consequences. And that means smaller provider networks. That means higher premiums. That means having trouble potentially getting an appointment with a doctor. That means having to navigate the government bureaucracy that comes along with Obamacare. So I would say, you know, typically they're talking points about equalizing women and men's premiums, and preventative care rely on very shady economics that don't match up with reality, don't match up with the incentive structure that should be in place, and rely on a definition of insurance that isn't insurance at all. It's simply a third-party membership club, effectively. But instead, we need to get back to talking about the benefits for women of having more market forces in our healthcare sector, because women are the primary consumers and decision makers in healthcare markets. And we could be empowered as consumers with more choice in plan, more diversity in plan, more choice in doctor, if we had a freer market in our healthcare system. So that's our message when we talk about healthcare. And I think it's such a shame that not only have women been, you know, targeted as an audience for so-called benefits under Obamacare, but they've been targeted primarily with the messaging about Obamacare, whether it's pulling on heartstrings about people with new coverage or what have you. But we need to get back to the facts, and the facts of the matter are women and men are better off without a government-controlled health sector.
Thank you, Hadley. Now, Sean, you founded a nonprofit to combat white-collar fraud before being AG and have taken some novel approaches and aggressively attacking affinity fraud. What have you specifically done, and why such an emphasis on that arena?
Great. Before I answer that, let me say, Anitere and Hadley and Conrad, amen, amen, and amen. I hope you all are as impressed with them as I am. It's energizing to have colleagues like this leading our party. With that, before I became AG, I was a partner in a large law firm doing a lot of securities litigation. We worked on cases like the Sir Alan Stanford fraud case, the second largest Ponzi scheme to the Madoff case. I was also a partner in a venture fund, and so saw a lot of the rampant fraud going on in the investment community. So we created a nonprofit to help educate people, especially the most vulnerable communities, senior citizens in particular, to help them be aware of signs of potential fraud. And we had, the great thing about the organization was the perfect confluence of bringing the private sector in, companies like Bruce Huff's company supporting us, bringing government in and regulators, because government I always think should be as small as possible, but we play a significant role, and then the nonprofit and education sectors. And we brought them all together, and we had these nationwide symposia that would tell people, you know, if somebody wants you to invest your entire life savings all by tomorrow without giving you any documents, please wait and don't do that. Just hold on. And it was remarkably effective. When I became Attorney General, we've imported a lot of those principles, continued to reach out to the private sector, to all of our partners, and emphasize this. Utah, as a small state, has a rampant problem. It's ravaging our state. Although we have some of the best economic outcomes in the entire country and so many different markers, affinity fraud, using a relationship of trust to take advantage of somebody else, to get them to invest in your scheme, is one of the biggest issues facing us. Estimates are that it siphons out $2 billion or so from our economy, which we could be putting towards education or real health care reform or all sorts of other things, entrepreneurism. And so what I've continued to do, we've worked just recently, I'm really excited about this. Our legislative session is coming up, and I've got bill sponsors to help me pass the first white-collar fraud registry that I'm aware of in the United States, much like a child sexual predator registry, to make sure that if you've rooked your neighbors out of tens of millions of dollars once or twice, your name's going to be on there, and there's going to be a light shining to all the investment world to make sure that they know, at least have some tools to be aware before they make those investments. We've been partnering with the AARP really aggressively. Just on a personal level, I've expanded, I've doubled the size of our white-collar fraud. Actually, I created one to begin with because we didn't technically have one. And put a lot of resources towards that in terms of anti-competitive behaviors in the community. So for us in the state of Utah, we want to send the message out, yes, we are very business friendly, but also if you're a scammer and a schemer, beware. You won't last in the state of Utah on my watch.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Well, thanks to all of our rising stars. And now I want to open the opportunity for questions from you in the audience. I only have one request, and that's to use one of the microphones. And the only other rule is that your question should be a question to the point, and that what you stand up there and say ends with a question mark. So with that. Thank you.
KV Kumar from California. My question is to Hadley. I turned around, I'm new, I'm a turnaround guy, specialist, that's what they call me. I turned around a healthcare company in 3 years, less than 3 years, 3 times the value of a dying healthcare company. And I am really saddened by President Obama's healthcare initiatives, and it has hurt the healthcare community much more than it has helped. And I appreciate if you can say in whatever concise way you can say, how we can help, bring the healthcare back what we really need for the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is a good question, and I spend my 9 to 5 trying to figure out how I can help bring our healthcare sector back to something that resembles a marketplace. I would say it starts with education. That's what we're into at IWF, educating people about what free market healthcare looks like. We have a new book out this past September 2014, and each chapter is our vision for what policy changes need to take place. My chapter is chapter 3, it's about healthcare, but the name of the book is Lean Together. And so as individual citizens, the best thing we can do is talk to our family members, friends, neighbors, and help them get educated about the issue, understand the framework of the issue, because I'm afraid we've accepted some bad premises in these arguments. And when people understand that, just as is the case with any overregulation, the little guys get hurt. I've seen a lot of consolidation in the healthcare sector, whether it's bigger hospitals or bigger insurers or bigger provider groups. The bigger guys may weather the storm, but the little guys cannot. And we're on the side of the little guy in this fight. So educating our friends and neighbors about that is a first step. Obviously, the last steps will involve legislative changes or big changes that happen because of a Supreme Court ruling that could lead to legislative changes. So be sure that your congressman knows how you feel about this issue.
Thank you, Hadley. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Robert Armstrong, our
Hi.
National Committee man, but short question. Team, short answers. We've got enough time for 2 more questions, I'm told, and then we have some very special guests we want to introduce you to. So our newly elected some officials from California. Short, sweet, all of us.
So
Thank
Robert
you.
Armstrong from Texas. I'm a physician, so I spend a lot of time thinking about healthcare issues as well. One question I have is, what about, to Hadley, what advice would you give our legislators in scaling back Obamacare? I mean, that's a really complicated question now that we have both houses of Congress. Those guys are looking into that. So what advice would you give them?
So I'm going to skip straight to the federal level, since we have to commend our state representatives doing the best that they can to fight back against Obamacare. But at the federal level, now is a very difficult time because we are waiting, many of us, to see what happens at the Supreme Court this spring and this summer. I believe after that ruling, there may be some important votes that take big bites at Obamacare. But right now, right away with the new Congress, I would recommend another full repeal vote. And I don't care what they say about it in the media. I think there ought to be another full repeal vote for new members to have a chance to assert their position. It also sends a message to the Supreme Court that the elected representatives of the people still don't want this law. And in terms of changes, in terms of scaling it back, I'm sure you're all aware that there was a vote on the 40-hour work week. There are other votes, other things, for example, repealing, again, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, which is a Medicare board. There are piecemeal changes that we can make to take away some of the most harmful aspects of Obamacare, and some things we can do to make it better. But of course, that's walking a very fine line, because the best thing is to repeal it entirely, to go back to the drawing board and create real health care reform that moves us away from an employer-centric insurance system, gives everyone the opportunity to buy the right amount of health insurance if they choose, and gives us more access to the health care services we need when we need them. So free market health care reform, everybody's got a plan. I've got a plan in Chapter 3 of Lean Together. But at the end of the day, it's about repealing Obamacare first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's okay. That's a hard question. Next, Ada, we're going to go to Ada. Short question.
I got you.
And on top of that, not to Hadley, to one of our other three guests, so that we can
like to listen
share
to Hadley. It's
share
great.
I mean, Hadley needs to take a break.
Obviously, Obamacare is kind of hot.
You know, Hadley needs a break here.
Dr. Fisher from North Carolina. I'm a physician, as is Dr. Armstrong. Just had a stroke on the 31st of December. And my question is to Mr. James, because you're a physicist. And one of the things I see is a dearth of kids who want to be scientists, et cetera. So what kind of policies do we need to develop to get kids interested in science?
There's a couple of things that I think we need to do. Number one, we need to completely change our education system. The way that we do it, even at the state level, I think has such low expectations for our kids that we don't challenge them. In our state of New Mexico, we're typically at the bottom of a lot of the rankings in terms of education. And so we've looked at things such as making sure that we have opportunities for kids to have STEM education. We're looking at new programs to try to incentivize teachers to go into those fields. One of the difficulties is the training of teachers in STEM. How do you make sure that teachers don't just get the book smarts of teaching science and engineering and math, but actually get real experience? And so we're talking about partnership programs where we maybe have teachers go and work in the field and do things over the summer to enhance their ability to teach those fields. That's really one of the things that we've talked about in the state of New Mexico, that it's not just about degrees, it's about skills. What are the things that these kids can do? And preparing students for the STEM field is very difficult. When you're talking about math preparation, you typically have to have those kids ready in 6th grade, because there's a progression of going from algebra to geometry to trigonometry to calculus in order for them to be taking calculus by the time they graduate high school. So we need whole-scale reform at the education level, and then also there are a lot of good private programs out there and charitable programs that try to get kids interested in science. That I don't think is where the problem is. It's really on the education side where I think we need to focus.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. One last question. This is it. Short, sweet.
My question is for Sean. I'm from your neighboring state of Arizona, and in the next couple of weeks we have the Super Bowl, not bragging, just saying. We have the Super Bowl, the Pro Bowl, and the Phoenix Open, but we also have the emerging problem of sex trafficking along with all of these activities. Have you been contacted by our state attorney general and our county attorney general for your expertise?
The answer is yes. Mark Brinovich, your new Attorney General, is fantastic. The party should be very proud of him. We work together on those issues, and we'll continue to do it. So,
good.
And congratulations. We'll probably be there for the Super Bowl.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, and let's give a big applause for our rising stars and the talent that has come to our party. Thank you. Thank you.